So as it was unfolding, what struck me about it is the fact, and now that more details have emerged, is the fact that this is a two-person plot. Perhaps there were others involved in supporting it or enabling it, but at least the two individuals who carried it out, father and son as well, appears to have been at least, if not fully, inspired by ISIS propaganda an ideology, and then the attack unfolded with the firearms. But I think it shows a couple of things. One, the depth of that ISIS propaganda, that even though ISIS is no longer the group that it was going back a decade or almost a decade ago, it still resonates, or the ideology resonates, and it can affect people in Australia. We had a major lone offender ISIS-inspired attack on New Year's Day, 2025 in New Orleans, if your viewers remember that. So this is going to be an enduring threat that all of our Western countries and other countries are going to have to face in the future.
Yes, and I want to know, what would agencies like the FBI or CIA there in the US be assessing what's happened there? What's in their thought process of what then perhaps it could inform them of perhaps potential security threats in the US?
So this is something that I spent in my government career a lot of time trying to dive into and understand is what makes someone go from just being a normal person to then becoming radicalized by whatever extremist ideologies are out there. Now, in this case, it was ISIS, and we've had here in the U.S. Hundreds of ISIS cases, and a decade before that, in the 2000s, Al Qaeda inspired cases. So again, this is a recurring pattern and theme we've seen, and all that effort that me and my colleagues spent about trying to understand how that process of radicalization and then mobilization of violence works. I think at the end of the day, we came with a sort of conclusion that there is no one process for this, and it's very individualized, and it's almost up to each individual and trying to look at them and what were the different factors that pull them into that pathway. But it's also very hard to detect and stop because certainly in the United States and perhaps in Australia and other countries, it's not illegal to be radicalized. It's only illegal when you cross over that line into potential criminal activity, where then law enforcement or the intelligence agencies may be able to get wind of it. But in this case here in Australia, we don't know how long these individuals were radicalized. It appears going back a few years, but there may have been a whole host of other factors that pushed them to conducting the attack yesterday.
Yes, and then what would the national security chiefs there right now be thinking in terms of national security levels in the US?
So right now here in the United States, I have to imagine my former colleagues and all the agencies you described are thinking about, is there the potential for some type of what we would call copycat attacks here in the US, where the same type of folks who are still radicalized by either ISIS ideology, Al Qaeda ideology, other jihadist worldviews, is now the time for them to try something similar? May not be against Jewish targets, may be against anything that they think is accessible to them based on their capability and whatever planning they have done in advance. And this is what makes this type of lone offender or even small person threat very difficult to detect, because the pool of people who are radicalized is probably quite large, but it's very hard to figure out who are the people who are going to go from just being angry and radicalized to then potentially committing acts of violence. So I'm sure there's a lot of consideration to that now as we get to into the holiday period, into the new year. Will we have to raise the security levels at key events and other things? It's already going to be high here in the United States, but will there need to be even more security on top of what's already being planned? These are, I think, are the things that are being considered here in the United States.
And would there be a degree of national sharing of national intelligence between the US and Australia at the moment?
Yeah, I would have to imagine that's always ongoing through the Five Eyes relationship, and then even the bilateral U.S.-Australian relationship. And I was part of that in my government career and had strong partnerships with all the Australian security agencies. But I have to imagine even now that in the aftermath of what is known about the two individuals, is there anything on the U.S. intelligence side that can assist the Australian counterparts, ACO, Australian Federal Police, New South Wales Police, in getting deeper into the plot and how it was carried out. And again, were there any other people around the father and the son who enabled this attack or supported it or helped guide it in any way? That I think has been happening almost from the beginning of the attack as it unfolded.
Yes, you talked about Islamic State, ISIS propaganda and its influence still there, but how much power do Islamic State have, particularly in their strongholds in Syria, for instance?
Well, in Iraq and Syria, the Islamic State no longer holds physical territory. They lost the caliphate with the fall of Raqqa, Syria, and Mosul, Iraq, over 2018 and 2019. And so that territory that they had captured in 2014 and 2015, which was vast between both countries and millions of people under their control, shrunk almost down to nothing. But still, ISIS remains as an organization. They have not been defeated militarily. There are assessed to be thousands of ISIS fighters still on the ground in Iraq and Syria, and probably thousands more in other parts of the world because there are other ISIS affiliated groups. And even over the weekend, the U.S. suffered the loss of two U.S. servicemen and a contractor who is supporting the U.S. military forces on the ground in Syria by what appears to be a lone ISIS gunman. So even from the U.S. side in Syria, it shows that a very decentralized ISIS organization can still present these on-the-ground type of threats to U.S. forces there in Syria, and probably the same thing in Iraq as well.
Okay, Javed Ali, really appreciate your analysis there early in the morning where you are. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.